Hey there, drowsy historian here. Tonight, we're drifting off to the soothing sounds of distant artillery, the sloshing mud, and the gentle scratching of lice under your collar. That's right, we're headed to the Western Front, where the air smells like wet wool and rotting flesh, and the only thing louder than the screaming is the silence that follows. Forget valor, forget honor. You're about to spend months, maybe years, ankle deep in diseased water, waiting to die for a stretch of land no one will remember. It's not glamorous, it's not heroic, but it is unforgettable, mostly because you'll never sleep the same again. So, before the trench collapses or your gas mask fails, go ahead and like the video and subscribe, but only if you enjoy calmly narrated tales of slow historical misery. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I like knowing who else is falling asleep to the sound of human despair. Now take a breath, just one. The air is not great. Get comfortable because tonight you're a World War I infantryman. And no, there's no way out. You arrive in the dark. Not metaphorically, though that too, but literally, because the train dumped you somewhere in France at night, and no one's bothered to tell you where here is. The air smells like manure, smoke, and something you sincerely hope isn't human. You're wearing a uniform that doesn't quite fit, boots that rub your ankles raw, and a helmet shaped like someone stepped on a pot lid. Your rifle already jams. You've never felt less prepared for anything in your life, which is fine because no one really expects you to survive. There's no fanfare, no flags, no speeches about duty and sacrifice. Just a bored corporal with a clipboard barking numbers and pointing at mud. You follow the man in front of you because he seems slightly less confused than you are. The group you're lumped in with all look the same. Blank faces, nervous hands, and a silent, shared hope that maybe the real fighting is somewhere else. That hope doesn't last long. A shell goes off in the distance. You flinch. No one else does. That's your first lesson. The next is the smell. The trenches are still miles off, but the wind carries whispers of what's waiting. Decay, sweat, old blood, and the sour stink of things left too long in the rain. You're herded into a barn with a roof that leaks and straw that smells faintly like mildew and something worse. There's no bed, just a plank of wood and a rat the size of a house cat who watches you like it's sizing up your face for chewing. The other men sleep with their boots on. You follow suit. You're learning fast. No one tells you what your job is. One day you carry crates. The next you dig a trench that immediately collapses. Orders are vague, redundant, and shouted by people who look more exhausted than you feel. You stop asking questions. You just do as you're told and hope the rations arrive before the rain does. When the food shows up, it's gray. When it doesn't, you chew on a biscuit so hard it chips a tooth. At some point, you realize you've stopped looking people in the eyes. You've stopped expecting dry clothes. You stopped thinking about when you'll go home. And then, just as quietly as it began, the waiting ends. Someone yells that you're moving to the front. No farewell, no good luck. Just a long march through deeper mud, past stretches you don't look at, toward a line of trenches that look less like protection and more like graves waiting for names. You climb down into the muck. Your boots vanish, So does the last of your optimism. Welcome to the war. This initial descent into the grim reality of the Western Front is a stark awakening, a brutal repudiation of any romanticized notions of warfare. The narrator, a drowsy historian, sets a chillingly detached yet deeply empathetic tone, inviting the listener to immerse themselves in the visceral horrors of a conflict that redefined human suffering. The imagery is immediate and overwhelming. The soothing sounds of distant artillery, juxtaposed with the sloshing mud and gentle scratching of lice, paints a picture of a world where the mundane and the monstrous coexist. The air itself is a character, thick with the stench of wet wool and rotting flesh, a constant, suffocating reminder of mortality. The silence, when it comes, is not a relief, but a heavier, more profound terror than the loudest explosions. A void pregnant with unspoken dread. This is not the war of recruitment posters or patriotic speeches. There is no valor, no honor, only the promise of months, maybe years, ankle deep in diseased water, waiting to die. The land itself is rendered meaningless, a stretch of land no one will remember, stripping away any pretense of noble sacrifice. The experience is unforgettable, not for its glory, but for its insidious psychological scarring, ensuring that you'll never sleep the same again. The casual, almost conversational invitation to like the video and subscribe for calmly narrated tales of slow historical misery underscores the macabre fascination with this particular brand of human despair, a dark humor that serves to highlight the bleakness rather than alleviate it. The arrival itself is devoid of ceremony. The darkness is not merely a metaphor for the unknown, but a literal, suffocating shroud. The train, an impersonal harbinger of doom, unloads its human cargo somewhere in France at night, leaving them disoriented and abandoned. The sensory assault continues. The manure, smoke, and something you sincerely hope isn't human assaults the nose, a prelude to the horrors to come. The uniform, ill-fitting and uncomfortable, is the first physical manifestation of the dehumanization process. The boots, already chafing, symbolize the relentless physical torment. The helmet, a pathetic parody of protection, and the jamming rifle, a harbinger of lethal unreliability, complete the picture of a soldier utterly unprepared for the reality he faces. The chilling realization that no one really expects you to survive is delivered with a brutal frankness that shatters any lingering illusions of heroism. The absence of fanfare, no flags, no speeches about duty and sacrifice, is a deliberate stripping away of the romantic veneer of war. Instead, the soldier is greeted by the mundane brutality of a bored corporal and the omnipresent mud. The act of following the man in front, driven by a desperate hope that he is slightly less confused, speaks volumes about the pervasive disorientation and fear. The collective anonymity of the new recruits, blank faces, nervous hands, and a silent, shared hope, underscores their shared vulnerability and the swift demise of their naive optimism. The distant shell, a percussive punctuation mark, serves as the first visceral lesson. Flinching is a luxury, a sign of a civilian mind yet to be hardened. The true horror, however, is not just the sound, but the smell, a creeping, insidious presence carried on the wind, a whisper of what's waiting. The decay, sweat, old blood, and the sour stink of things left too long in the rain is the olfactory signature of the Western Front, a scent that will forever be etched into the soldier's memory. The temporary refuge in the leaky barn with its mildewed straw and the unsettling presence of a rat the size of a house cat offers no solace. It is merely a transitional space, a holding pen before the true immersion into the abyss. The rat, an early symbol of the pervasive vermin that will become an inescapable part of trench life, observes with an unnerving intelligence, sizing up your face for chewing. The quick adoption of sleeping with boots on, a pragmatic adaptation to a hostile environment, highlights the rapid erosion of civilian habits, the lack of clear instructions, the vague and redundant orders, the constant physical labor of digging trenches that immediately collapse, all contribute to a sense of futility and exhaustion. The soldier learns to suppress questions, to simply obey, driven by the primal need for sustenance, hoping the rations arrive before the rain does. The gray, unappetizing food, or its absence, further underscores the degradation of basic human needs. The gradual withdrawal from human connection, the cessation of eye contact, the abandonment of hope for dry clothes or a return home marks a profound psychological shift. The waiting, a constant companion, finally ends not with a bang, but with a shouted command to move to the front. The final march is a descent into a landscape of despair, where trenches are not fortifications but graves waiting for names. The vanishing boots in the muck symbolize the complete loss of self, of hope, of any remaining optimism. The chilling, almost welcoming pronouncement, "Welcome to the war," seals the soldier's fate, marking the definitive end of innocence and the beginning of an unimaginable ordeal. This opening section effectively establishes the tone and the brutal reality of the Western Front, setting the stage for the subsequent exploration of the soldier's experiences. The narrative voice, a blend of detached observation and visceral detail, creates an immersive and unsettling atmosphere. The initial shock and disillusionment, the immediate confrontation with the harsh physical and psychological environment, and the rapid erosion of civilian expectations are all vividly portrayed. The introduction of key elements, like the mud, the smell, the rats, and the constant sense of dread, provides a foundational understanding of the unique horrors of trench warfare. The section concludes with the soldier's full immersion into this new terrifying reality, stripped of all pretense and hope, ready to face the curriculum of despair that awaits. You thought training was hard. You thought being shouted at by a man with a mustache so thick it needed its own postal code was the worst thing that could happen to you. Marching in the rain, standing in formation until your knees locked, peeling potatoes until your fingers bled. That was hell, wasn't it? That was the crucible of war. That was where you'd be made into a man. Except, of course, it wasn't. It was theater, a pageant of preparation that gave you the illusion of readiness, like painting a target on a cardboard box and calling it a tank. Basic training didn't prepare you for anything. It just made sure you could die in uniform without tripping over your own rifle. They told you it was about discipline, about building resilience. What they didn't tell you was that none of the yelling, sweating, or marching would matter when your boots disintegrated after a week of rain, or when your fingers were too numb to load your rifle, or when the man beside you exploded without warning. You learned how to make a bed so tightly a coin could bounce off it. No one taught you how to sleep standing up, or in 4-minute increments between shellings, or while sharing your blanket with lice. You spent weeks practicing how to salute properly. Now, the only people worth saluting are either dead or about to be. There was a structure to training: drills, routines, schedules. You hated it at the time, but at least it was something. At least it made sense. Out here, nothing does. You dig trenches in places they told you were already dug. You march east, only to be told you were supposed to go west. Orders change by the hour, but you're expected to keep up. Out here, discipline means not screaming when you step on something soft that used to be human. It means staying still when you want to run and moving when your legs are begging you to stop. There are no medals for doing things right, only consequences if you don't. Back in camp, you were given a daily ration of food, usually disgusting but edible. Here, you're lucky if your meal arrives warm or at all. You used to complain about the blandness of your stew. Now, you scrape mold off your bread and chew it anyway, because the alternative is hunger, and hunger makes you stupid. Training warned you about dehydration. It didn't tell you you'd end up drinking water filtered through sandbags and rat droppings. You used to carry a canteen like it was sacred. Now, it's just another grimy relic you pretend still does its job. You remember your drill sergeant saying something about brotherhood, camaraderie, that war would bind you to the men beside you like nothing else. And sure, that's true, in the same way a shipwreck bonds you to whoever happens to be clinging to the same piece of driftwood. You don't talk about your feelings out here. You don't open up. You share cigarettes, grunts, and the occasional look that says, "If I die, don't waste my rations." Some men sing, others pray. Most of you just stare. It's not that you don't care about each other. You just don't have the energy to pretend you'll all make it out. The uniforms were crisp back then. Your boots were stiff, your buttons shiny, your weapon oiled and clean. You looked like a soldier. Now, you're soaked through to the bone, wearing 3 layers of damp wool that itch like punishment. Your helmet is dented. Your rifle is rusting. Your socks are stiff with old blood. Yours or someone else's, it hardly matters. You haven't shaved in weeks, and your breath smells like meat gone wrong. You'd be unrecognizable to your own mother if she could even see you through the smoke. The worst part? You still believed it back then. The speeches, the slogans, the posters with heroic faces marching off to glory. You actually believed you'd be brave, that courage was a thing you could conjure when needed. But out here, courage looks like crawling into the mud and pretending you're invisible. It looks like keeping your mouth shut when someone starts sobbing in the dark. It looks like surviving, even when part of you doesn't want to. In training, they told you to be strong. They never told you what strength actually costs. There's a moment that sticks with you. You were standing in formation during a downpour, rain dripping from your nose, uniform clinging like a second skin. The sergeant yelled something about grit, about enduring hardship. You remember thinking, this is it. This is me at my worst. But it wasn't, not even close, because now, as you crouch in a trench filled with freezing sludge, watching steam rise from the body of a man who used to have a name, you understand something your instructors never said aloud. The worst is not an event. It's a place you live in, a state you never leave. You keep telling yourself the training helped, that it gave you a foundation, a way to cope, but really, it just gave you a script, one you've long since stopped following. You don't march anymore. You slog. You don't shout. You mutter. You don't dream. You flinch. They trained you to aim, fire, reload. They didn't train you to watch someone bleed out from the neck and keep your hands steady. They didn't train you for the smell of a wound gone septic. They didn't train you to dig a grave in mud while whispering the wrong name because you didn't know the right one. So, yes, training was hard, but it was also clean, contained, supervised. You never thought you'd miss it. Now, you'd give anything to go back to those miserable drills and meaningless punishments, not because they were good, but because they ended. Out here, nothing ends. It just gets quieter, then louder, then quieter again. And through it all, you keep going because no one taught you how to stop. This section delves into the profound chasm between the idealized, structured world of military training and the chaotic, brutal reality of the front lines. The initial rhetorical questions immediately challenge the soldiers' preconceived notions of hardship, painting a vivid picture of basic training as a mere theatrical performance, a deceptive prelude to the true horrors of war. The drill sergeant, a figure of authority and terror in training, is reduced to a caricature with a comically thick mustache, his shouts and demands rendered meaningless in the face of genuine existential threat. The mundane tasks of marching, standing, and peeling potatoes, once perceived as the epitome of suffering, are now exposed as a cruel charade of the first thing you notice is the mud. Not regular mud, not the kind you used to trudge through as a child or curse at during training. This mud has depth, intent, personality. It grabs at your boots with greedy fingers and refuses to let go. It swallows everything: your footing, your socks, your hope. Every step is a gamble. Sometimes you sink ankle deep. Sometimes it's knee deep. Once, you watch a man disappear up to his thighs before two others haul him out like he's caught in quicksand. No one laughs. The mud doesn't just slow you down, it keeps souvenirs. The second thing is the smell. It's the kind of odor that feels like it's been cooked low and slow over the course of months. A stew of rot, sweat, feces, gunpowder, and something metallic you quickly realize is blood. It clings to your clothes. It seeps into your pores. After just a few hours, you stop noticing it consciously. Your brain gives up, but deep down, something in your animal instincts keeps screaming that this is not a safe place. This is not where humans are supposed to be. Then comes the noise. Not the noise of battle, not yet. The trench has its own language, quieter but somehow more disturbing. Sloshing boots, ragged coughing, the constant drip of water finding its way through every surface. Somewhere nearby, a man mutters to himself in a low, steady rhythm over and over again. You don't know if it's a prayer, a memory, or just static his brain picked up from the shelling. And then, occasionally, there's silence, sharp and sudden, as if even the war is holding its breath. That's when you feel most afraid. This section plunges the reader into the immediate, overwhelming sensory experience of the trenches, focusing on the omnipresent mud, the pervasive stench, and the unsettling symphony of sounds that define this hellish environment. The mud, far from being a mere inconvenience, is personified as a malevolent entity with depth, intent, and personality. It is a living, breathing antagonist, actively hindering movement and claiming souvenirs from those who dare to traverse its treacherous expanse. The vivid description of sinking ankle deep or knee deep, and the chilling image of a man disappearing up to his thighs before being hauled out, underscores the physical toll and the constant threat of being swallowed by the earth itself. The absence of laughter in such a dire situation highlights the grim acceptance of their fate, a testament to the dehumanizing power of the environment. The olfactory assault is equally potent. The smell is not just a scent, but a stew of rot, sweat, feces, gunpowder, and something metallic you quickly realize is blood. This visceral description paints a horrifying picture of the trench as a decaying organism, its stench a constant reminder of death and degradation, the detail that it clings to your clothes and seeps into your pores emphasizes the inescapable nature of this foul odor, a constant companion that even the brain eventually gives up on consciously registering. Yet, the primal instinct remains, a silent scream that this is an unnatural, unsafe place for human existence. Beyond the visual and olfactory, the auditory landscape of the trench is equally disturbing. The noise is not the expected roar of battle, but a more insidious, quieter, but somehow more disturbing symphony of sloshing boots, ragged coughing, the constant drip, drip of water. These are the sounds of slow decay, of bodies breaking down, of an environment relentlessly eroding human resilience. The distant, rhythmic muttering of a man, its meaning ambiguous, a prayer, a memory, or just static his brain picked up from the shelling, adds a layer of psychological unease, hinting at the mental fragility of those trapped within this nightmare. And then, the most terrifying sound of all, silence, sharp and sudden, as if even the war is holding its breath. This momentary cessation of noise is not a reprieve, but an amplification of fear, a pregnant pause before the inevitable. Unknown horror, it is in these moments of eerie quiet that the true terror of the trench manifests. A fear born not of direct threat, but of the anticipation of it. The physical conditions within the trench are meticulously detailed, emphasizing the constant discomfort and the relentless battle against the elements. The assigned space, a mere 6 ft long, 2 ft wide, and waist deep in filth, is a claustrophobic prison. The rotted through wooden planks and walls, slick with moss, mold, and something you don't want to investigate further, paint a picture of decay and neglect. The futile attempt to dig a sump to combat the ever-present water, only to have the hole fill faster than it can be emptied, highlights the Sisyphean nature of their struggle. The trench is not just wet, it is human soup, a grotesque mixture of man and mud, the complete absence of anything dry. Not your socks, not your rucksack, not even your cigarettes, underscores the pervasive dampness that permeates every aspect of their existence. The physical manifestations of this constant exposure are chilling. Hands are swollen and cracked, feet squish when you walk, and the creeping dread of trench foot, a slow, inevitable devourer of flesh. The image of a man peeling off a chunk of skin with his boot, his only reaction, a sigh of resigned knowledge, is a stark and horrifying testament to the physical and emotional numbness that sets in. The rats, introduced as an integral part of the trench ecosystem, are depicted with an unnerving level of detail and agency. The first encounter with a rat nibbling on the edge of your blanket with the calm entitlement of a landlord collecting rent immediately establishes their dominance. These are not mere pests, but formidable creatures, huge, and possessing an almost human-like intelligence, their eyes reflecting candlelight, like it's mocking you. The audacity of a rat baring its teeth when shooed away, and the subsequent discovery of two more sharing rations, one even sitting directly on a biscuit, further solidifies their position as co-inhabitants, not intruders. The soldier's resigned acceptance, letting the rat finish its meal, encapsulates the unspoken truth of trench life. The rats live here. You don't. This simple statement encapsulates the profound sense of displacement and temporary existence that defines the soldier's reality. The rats, with their names, territories, social structures, are the true residents, breeding in the walls and feasting on the fallen. The chilling anecdotes of a rat gnawing on a severed finger and another curling up in a dead man's mouth are not just gruesome details, but powerful symbols of the ultimate degradation of human life in this environment. The mutual agreement that the rats won't bother the living too much, and the living won't begrudge them when they are no longer living, is a testament to the complete surrender of human dignity and the acceptance of a new, horrifying natural order. Sleep, a fundamental human need, becomes a complicated and elusive luxury in the trenches. The constant threat of shelling, the dampness, and the cold conspire to keep the soldiers hovering at the edge of rest. Even when sleep does come, it is a restless, unrefreshing state that leaves them more tired than before. The physical discomforts are relentless. Back screaming, face pressed against a surface that smells like mildew and sweat. The grotesque detail of waking up with a beetle crawling into one's ear, and the soldier's nonchalant reaction. You don't even panic, you just flick it away and roll. Over speaks volumes about the extreme desensitization to horror and discomfort. This is not just physical endurance, but a profound psychological hardening, where even the most repulsive intrusions are met with a weary indifference. Meals are equally grim, a constant battle against the elements and the inherent unpleasantness of the food itself. Eating from a dented mess tin while balancing on one knee in an attempt to keep mud out of the food is a futile exercise. It never works. Everything tastes of dirt and metal, a constant reminder of their squalid surroundings. The grim acceptance of chewy and unidentifiable food swallowed anyway because hunger trumps doubt, highlights the desperate struggle for survival, the loss of squeamishness, the ability to gnaw on gristle like it's a delicacy, and the unspoken understanding about the origin of the meat, horses, further illustrate the extreme conditions that force men to abandon all previous standards of decency and hygiene. Privacy is non existent, a forgotten concept in this communal hell. The crude methods of waste disposal and the complete abandonment of personal hygiene haven't washed properly in weeks. Collective stench of men decomposing very, very slowly while still alive underscore the complete breakdown of civilized norms. The deliberate avoidance of looking too closely at sores on your skin or the blackness starting to creep up your toenails is a coping mechanism, a desperate attempt to maintain a semblance of sanity by ignoring the inevitable physical decay. After a few days, the trench, despite its horrors, begins to feel normal, not good, not safe, but familiar. This chilling adaptation is a testament to the human capacity for resilience, but also to the insidious nature of the trench, which slowly but surely transforms its inhabitants. Learning where to step, how to balance a rifle, and the chilling indifference to a man coughing up blood nearby are all signs of this profound transformation. This is not mere survival, it is adaptation, a process of becoming part of it, a soggy, lice-ridden extension of the trench itself. The terrifying realization that if the trench wanted you gone, it would have swallowed you already, implies a sentient, malevolent force, further emphasizing the soldier's complete subjugation to this environment. The final, poignant reflection. This isn't a test, this is the curriculum. Shatters any lingering hope of an end to the suffering. The trench is not a temporary ordeal, but a permanent state of being, a new reality where life in the trenches never stops being awful, it just becomes familiar. This section powerfully conveys the physical and psychological toll of trench warfare, painting a bleak and unforgettable portrait of human endurance in the face of unimaginable horror. Your assigned space is about 6 ft long, 2 ft wide, and waist deep in filth. The walls are supposed to be reinforced with wooden planks, but many have rotted through. The rest are slick with moss, mold, and something you don't want to investigate. Further, you're told to dig a sump to keep water from collecting underfoot. You dig, of course, and the water laughs. The hole fills faster than you can empty it, and within minutes, the trench is back to its usual consistency, human soup. There's no such thing as dry anymore. Not your socks, not your rucksack, not even your cigarettes, which crumble in your fingers like wet tissue. Your hands are swollen and cracked. Your feet squish when you walk, and you're starting to understand why people here talk about trench foot the way others talk about wolves or storms, a creeping inevitability that devours you slowly. You've seen a man pull off his boot and peel away a chunk of skin with it. He didn't scream. He just sighed like he already knew. This segment of the narrative vividly portrays the immediate, physical reality of existence within the trenches, emphasizing the cramped, unsanitary, and perpetually damp conditions that define daily life. The description of the assigned space as a mere 6 feet long and 2 feet wide and waist deep in filth immediately establishes a sense of claustrophobia and degradation. This is not a living space, but a mere holding pen, a temporary grave. The supposed reinforcements of wooden planks are a cruel joke, having succumbed to the relentless dampness and decay, leaving the walls slick with a repulsive mixture of moss, mold, and unidentified ominous substances. The constant battle against water is a central theme, highlighted by the futile attempt to dig a sump. The water's laughter at the soldiers' efforts personifies the environment as an active, mocking antagonist, relentlessly reclaiming any ground gained. The trench quickly reverts to its usual consistency, human soup, a grotesque and unforgettable image that encapsulates the pervasive, unsanitary conditions. The complete absence of dryness is a recurring motif, underscoring the relentless physical discomfort. Not only are socks and rucksacks perpetually soaked, but even cigarettes, a small comfort in this hell, crumble like wet tissue, symbolizing the erosion of even the most basic pleasures. The physical toll is graphically depicted. Hands are swollen and cracked, feet squish when you walk. These are not minor inconveniences, but signs of severe, debilitating conditions. The introduction of trench foot as a creeping inevitability that devours you slowly elevates it from a medical condition to a predatory force, akin to wolves or storms. The chilling anecdote of a man peeling off a chunk of skin with his boot, his only reaction, a resigned sigh, is a powerful testament to the extreme physical and psychological numbness that sets in. It illustrates a level of suffering so profound that even agonizing pain elicits only a weary acceptance, a stark contrast to the expected human response. Beyond the immediate physical discomfort, the constant contamination of the environment profoundly impacts every aspect of the soldier's existence. The air itself is a heavy, putrid mixture, a constant assault on the senses. Every breath is a reminder of the decay, the unburied dead, and the living bodies slowly succumbing to the elements. The food, when it arrives, is not merely unappetizing, but often contaminated, a grim necessity rather than a source of nourishment. The act of eating becomes a desperate gamble, a constant negotiation with hunger and the risk of illness. The lack of proper sanitation means that human waste is an ever-present reality, contributing to the pervasive stench and the spread of disease. The trenches are not just damp, they are breeding grounds for bacteria, fungi, and parasites, silently attacking the soldiers from within and without. The psychological impact of living in such conditions is immense. The constant exposure to filth, decay, and the physical deterioration of oneself and comrades leads to a profound sense of dehumanization. The body becomes a vessel for suffering, its needs reduced to the most basic and primal. The loss of privacy, the inability to escape the collective stench, and the sight of others' suffering erodes any sense of individual dignity. The mind, too, begins to adapt, developing a grim indifference to conditions that would be unbearable in any other context. The soldier's ability to function To continue the endless cycle of digging and waiting is a testament to a terrifying resilience born of necessity, a survival mechanism that blurs the lines between human and animal. The narrative subtly highlights the contrast between the soldier's previous life and his current reality. The mud, once a minor nuisance during childhood play or training, is now a monstrous entity. The concept of dry becomes a distant memory, a luxury from a forgotten world. This constant juxtaposition reinforces the profound transformation the soldier undergoes, stripped of all comforts and forced to confront the raw, brutal essence of existence. The body, once a source of strength and capability, becomes a fragile, vulnerable entity, constantly battling against the elements and the insidious forces of decay. The very act of walking, once effortless, is now a painful, squelching ordeal, each step a reminder of the trench's relentless grip. The pervasive dampness and cold contribute to a constant state of hypothermia, weakening the body's defenses and making it more susceptible to disease. The soldier's clothes, perpetually wet, offer little protection, and the constant itching from damp wool and lice adds another layer of torment. The skin, constantly exposed to moisture and filth, becomes a canvas for sores, infections, and the dreaded trench foot. The blackness creeping up the toenails is a visual metaphor for the slow, inevitable decay that consumes the soldiers, a silent, internal rot mirroring the external environment. The casual mention of dealing with something falling off then speaks to a chilling acceptance of bodily disintegration, a grim pragmatism born of extreme circumstances. In this environment, the concept of hygiene becomes a cruel joke, a forgotten luxury. The inability to wash properly, the shared stench, and the collective decomposition of living men create a unique and horrifying sensory experience. This lack of cleanliness is not merely an aesthetic issue, but a direct contributor to the rampant diseases that plague the trenches. From dysentery to typhus, the soldier's body, once a temple, becomes a vessel for illness, a testament to the complete breakdown of civilized norms and the triumph of the primitive. The constant presence of human waste, both visible and invisible, further reinforces the sense of degradation and the loss of dignity. Ultimately, this section paints a bleak and unyielding picture of life in the trenches as a constant struggle against overwhelming physical and environmental forces. The soldier is not merely fighting an enemy, but battling the very ground he stands on, the air he breathes, and the insidious decay that threatens to consume him. The detailed descriptions of the cramped spaces, the relentless dampness, the pervasive filth, and the physical manifestations of suffering create a powerful and unforgettable image of a hellish existence. The narrative's unflinching portrayal of the dehumanizing effects of such conditions leaves a lasting impression, highlighting the profound and irreversible transformation of the men who endured the Western Front. The soldier's journey into this abyss is not just a physical one, but a descent into a new, horrifying reality where the boundaries of human endurance are constantly tested and redefined. The section concludes with a chilling sense of resignation, where the soldier's body and mind are irrevocably intertwined with the very filth that surrounds him, a permanent resident of this living grave. And then there are the rats. You meet your first one on your second day, nibbling on the edge of your blanket with the calm entitlement of a landlord collecting rent. It's huge, not large, huge. You could put a saddle on it. Its eyes reflect your candlelight like it's mocking you. And when you try to shoo it away, it bares its teeth. You've never seen a rat look insulted before. Later that night, you find two more sharing your rations. One of them is sitting directly on your biscuit, staring you down as it eats. You let it finish. The rats live here. You don't. That's the unspoken truth of trench life. You are the visitors, temporary, interchangeable. The rats have names, territories, social structures. They breed in the walls and feast on the fallen. You once watched one gnawing on a severed finger like it was a snack. Another crawled into a dead man's mouth and curled up like it was a bed. No one stopped them. There's a mutual agreement now. They won't bother you too much while you're alive, and you won't begrudge them when you're not. This section vividly introduces the pervasive and unsettling presence of rats in the trenches, elevating them from mere pests to significant, almost sentient co-inhabitants. The initial encounter is framed with a chilling sense of normalcy, the rat's calm entitlement immediately establishing its dominance over the human occupants. The description of its size, huge, not large, huge, you could put a saddle on it, emphasizes its monstrous proportions, transforming it into a creature of nightmare rather than a common rodent. The detail of its eyes, reflecting candlelight, like it's mocking you, imbues the rat with a malevolent intelligence, suggesting a conscious awareness of its superior position in this grim hierarchy. The soldier's attempt to shoo it away, met with a defiant baring of teeth and an insulted expression, further reinforces this unsettling anthropomorphism, blurring the lines between man and beast. The subsequent discovery of multiple rats brazenly sharing rations, one even perched directly on a biscuit while staring down the soldier, solidifies their territorial claim. The soldier's resigned acceptance, allowing the rat to finish its meal, is a profound moment of surrender, a tacit acknowledgement of the rat's supremacy. This surrender is explicitly articulated in the chilling declaration, "The rats live here, you don't." This simple, stark statement encapsulates the dehumanizing reality of trench life, where soldiers are reduced to temporary, interchangeable visitors in a world ruled by vermin. The rats, in contrast, possess a sense of belonging and permanence, with their own names, territories, social structures, a grotesque parody of human society. Their role as scavengers is depicted with unflinching detail, highlighting their macabre diet and their intimate connection to death. The image of rats breeding in the walls and feasting on the fallen underscores the constant presence of death and decay, and the rat's role in the grim cycle of life and death in the trenches. The anecdotes of a rat gnawing on a severed finger like it was a snack, and another crawling into a dead man's mouth to curl up like it was a bed, are not merely sensational, but deeply symbolic. They represent the ultimate degradation of human dignity, where the dead are not afforded respect, but become mere sustenance for the trench's true inhabitants. The fact that no one stopped them speaks to a profound sense of helplessness and resignation, a recognition of the futility of resisting this grotesque natural order. The mutual agreement between soldiers and rats is a chilling testament to the psychological adaptation required for survival. The unspoken understanding that rats won't bother you too much while you're alive, and you won't begrudge them when you're not, is a dark pact, a pragmatic acceptance of a horrifying reality. It implies a transactional relationship based on survival, where the living tolerate the rats in exchange for a temporary reprieve from their more aggressive scavenging, knowing that their turn will inevitably come. This agreement underscores the profound shift in values and priorities that occurs in the trenches, where the sanctity of human life is diminished, and the boundaries between the living and the dead, and between humans and animals, become disturbingly blurred. The rats serve as a constant, visceral reminder of the unsanitary conditions, the pervasive disease, and the ever-present threat of death. Their presence contributes to the psychological torment, fostering a sense of helplessness and disgust. The soldiers are forced to share their most intimate spaces, their blankets, their food, their very bodies, with these repulsive creatures, further eroding their sense of self and dignity. The constant scurry of rats in the walls, the rustling in the straw, and the sight of their beady eyes in the dim light create an atmosphere of perpetual unease and anxiety. Even in moments of relative calm, the rats are a constant, unsettling presence, a living embodiment of the trench's grim reality. Moreover, the rats symbolize the futility of human endeavor in this environment. Despite the soldiers' efforts to maintain some semblance of order and cleanliness, the rats thrive, multiplying in the very fabric of the trenches. They are a force of nature, an unstoppable tide of vermin that mocks human attempts at control. Their ability to adapt and flourish in such extreme conditions highlights the fragility of human life and the overwhelming power of the environment. The soldiers, with their elaborate training and their advanced weaponry, are ultimately reduced to coexisting with creatures that are, in many ways, better suited to this desolate landscape. This section, while focusing on the rats, also subtly reflects on the broader themes of dehumanization and the loss of control. The soldiers, stripped of their individuality and reduced to mere cogs in a brutal war machine, find themselves at the bottom of a new food chain, subservient to the very creatures they once considered pests. The rats, in their grotesque dominance, become a mirror reflecting the soldiers' own diminished status, their lives as expendable as the discarded rations they share. The narrative's unflinching portrayal of this grim coexistence leaves a lasting impression, highlighting the profound psychological and moral compromises forced upon those who endured the Western Front. The rats are not just a detail, they are a central metaphor for the pervasive decay, the loss of humanity, and the grim hierarchy of survival that defined life in the trenches. The rat's presence also contributes to the constant psychological torment, endured by the soldiers, the scurry of their tiny feet in the walls, the rustling in the straw, and the occasional glimpse of their beady eyes in the dim light create an atmosphere of perpetual unease and anxiety. Even in moments of relative calm, the rats are a constant, unsettling presence, a living embodiment of the trench's grim reality. They are a reminder of the unsanitary conditions, the pervasive disease, and the ever-present threat of death. The soldiers are forced to share their most intimate spaces, their blankets, their food, their very bodies, with these repulsive creatures, further eroding their sense of self and dignity. The psychological impact of this constant exposure to vermin is profound, contributing to the overall sense of degradation and despair that permeates trench life. Furthermore, the rats symbolize the futility of human endeavor in this environment. Despite the soldiers' efforts to maintain some semblance of order and cleanliness, the rats thrive, multiplying in the very fabric of the trenches. They are a force of nature, an unstoppable tide of vermin that mocks human attempts at control. Their ability to adapt and flourish in such extreme conditions highlights the fragility of human life and the overwhelming power of the environment. The soldiers, with their elaborate training and their advanced weaponry, are ultimately reduced to coexisting with creatures that are, in many ways, better suited to this desolate landscape. This stark contrast between human ambition and the raw, untamed reality of the trenches serves as a powerful commentary on the destructive nature of war, which strips away all pretense of civilization and reduces existence to its most primal form. This section, while focusing on the rats, also subtly reflects on the broader themes of dehumanization and the loss of control. The soldiers, stripped of their individuality and reduced to mere cogs in a brutal war machine, find themselves at the bottom of a new food chain, subservient to the very creatures they once considered pests. The rats, in their grotesque dominance, become a mirror reflecting the soldiers' own diminished status, their lives as expendable as the discarded rations they share. The narrative's unflinching portrayal of this grim coexistence leaves a lasting impression, highlighting the profound psychological and moral compromises forced upon those who endured the Western Front. The rats are not just a detail, they are a central metaphor for the pervasive decay, the loss of humanity, and the grim hierarchy of survival that defined life in the trenches. Their presence is a constant, gnawing reminder of the abyss into which the soldiers have descended, a world where the natural order has been inverted and the lines between predator and prey, human and animal, have become terrifyingly blurred. The soldier's acceptance of this reality, his resignation to sharing his existence with these creatures, is a testament to the profound and irreversible transformation wrought by the war. It is a world where even the most basic human instincts of revulsion and self-preservation are slowly eroded, replaced by a grim acceptance of the inevitable. The rats, in their relentless pursuit of sustenance, embody the relentless, indifferent nature of the war itself, a force that consumes everything in its path, leaving behind only decay and despair. The narrative's power lies in its ability to make the reader feel the visceral discomfort and psychological unease of this shared existence, forcing a confrontation with the uncomfortable truth of what it means to be human in such an inhuman environment. The rats are not just a threat, they are a constant, living symbol of the soldier's own degradation, a mirror reflecting the grim reality of their existence. Their unyielding presence underscores the fact that in the trenches, survival is not about heroism or glory, but about enduring the unbearable day after day in a world where even the smallest creatures hold a terrifying power. Sleeping is complicated. You sleep in shifts and never well. The ground is too wet, the walls too cold. The constant knowledge that a shell might hit too close or not close enough keeps you hovering at the edge of rest. When you do sleep, it's the kind of sleep that leaves you more tired than before. You wake up with your back screaming and your face pressed against a surface that smells like mildew and sweat. Once, you wake up with a beetle crawling into your ear. You don't even panic. You just flick it away and roll over. Meals are brought up when they can be. You eat from a dented mess tin while balancing on one knee, trying to keep the mud out of your food. It never works. Everything tastes like dirt and metal. Sometimes you chew something chewy that shouldn't be, but you swallow it anyway. Hunger trumps doubt. You used to gag at the sight of gristle. Now you gnaw on it like it's a delicacy. No one asks questions about the meat. You've all seen what happens to horses out here. There's no privacy. None. You piss in a tin. You purdy in a box. And you bury both somewhere. You're almost certain won't be dug up again by accident. Hygiene is a fantasy. You haven't washed properly in weeks, and neither has anyone else. You're all starting to smell the same, a collective stench of men decomposing very, very slowly while still alive. This section delves into the profound degradation of basic human needs, sleep, food, and privacy within the brutal confines of the trenches. The narrative immediately establishes the impossibility of true rest, painting sleep not as a restorative act, but as a further source of torment. The phrase, "sleeping is complicated," is a masterful understatement, setting the tone for the grim realities that follow. The physical discomforts are relentless. The perpetually wet ground, the biting cold of the trench walls, and the ever-present threat of artillery fire conspire to keep the soldier in a constant state of hypervigilance. The paradoxical outcome of sleep, leaving one more tired than before, underscores the profound exhaustion that permeates every fiber of their being. The body, instead of recuperating, is further assaulted, waking with a back screaming and a face pressed against a surface reeking of mildew and sweat. This visceral imagery emphasizes the pervasive dampness and unsanitary conditions that define their existence. The narrative's stark portrayal of the beetle crawling into the soldier's ear and his subsequent lack of panic is a chilling testament to the extreme desensitization that occurs in the trenches. This isn't just resilience, it's a profound psychological shift where the grotesque becomes mundane and the instinct for self-preservation is dulled by constant exposure to horror. The casual flicking away of the insect and rolling over speaks volumes about the depth of their weariness and the erosion of normal human reactions. Such an incident which would provoke a strong reaction in any other context, is met with weary indifference, highlighting the profound psychological toll of continuous exposure to unimaginable conditions. Food, like sleep, is stripped of its nourishing and comforting qualities, becoming merely a means of survival. Meals are a precarious affair, brought up irregularly and consumed under the most challenging circumstances. The image of eating from a dented mess tin while balancing on one knee, trying to keep the mud out of your food, vividly illustrates the constant struggle against the environment. The inevitable outcome: it never works. Everything tastes like dirt and metal, reinforces the pervasive contamination and the grim reality of their sustenance. The description of chewy and unidentifiable food swallowed out of sheer necessity because hunger trumps doubt speaks to the desperate hunger that overrides any sense of disgust or caution. The transformation of gristle from something to be gagged at to a delicacy further highlights the extreme conditions that force men to abandon all previous standards of decency and taste. The unspoken understanding about the origin of the meat. No one asks questions about the meat. You've all seen what happens to horses out here, is a chilling detail that underscores the brutal pragmatism of survival, where even the most taboo sources of food are accepted without question. This grim acceptance of their diet is a powerful symbol of the dehumanization process, where the basic human need for sustenance overrides all other considerations, including moral ones. Privacy, a fundamental aspect of human dignity, is utterly obliterated in the trenches. The blunt statement, "there's no privacy, none," sets the stage for a disturbing depiction of communal living. The acts of urination and defecation, normally private bodily functions, are reduced to public, undignified necessities. The use of a tin for piss and a box for other bodily functions, followed by the desperate attempt to bury them somewhere you're almost certain won't be dug up again by accident, paints a picture of constant exposure and vulnerability. This complete lack of personal space and the forced intimacy of shared bodily functions contribute significantly to the erosion of self and the sense of constant degradation. The trenches are not just a physical battleground, but a psychological one, where the very essence of what it means to be human is systematically dismantled. Hygiene, too, is a forgotten luxury, a fantasy in this squalid environment. The admission, "you haven't washed properly in weeks, and neither has anyone else," is followed by the chilling observation that you're all starting to smell the same, a collective stench of men decomposing very, very slowly while still alive. This collective stench is not merely an unpleasant odor, but a powerful symbol of their shared fate, a living testament to their slow, inevitable decay. It highlights the pervasive, unsanitary conditions that lead to widespread disease and physical deterioration. The inability to maintain personal cleanliness further contributes to the sense of dehumanization, blurring the lines between the living and the dead, and reducing the soldiers to a state of primal existence. The constant presence of filth, disease, and the pervasive odor creates an environment that is not only physically debilitating, but also profoundly psychologically damaging. The loss of personal hygiene is a direct assault on their sense of self, their dignity, and their humanity, leaving them as little more than decaying bodies in a decaying landscape. This section powerfully conveys the systematic stripping away of human dignity and comfort in the trenches. Sleep becomes a source of exhaustion, food a grim necessity, and privacy a forgotten concept. The narrative's unflinching portrayal of these basic human needs being degraded and distorted paints a vivid picture of the profound physical and psychological toll of trench warfare. The soldier's adaptation to these unbearable conditions, his desensitization to the grotesque, and his grim acceptance of a life devoid of comfort and dignity underscore the extreme nature of his ordeal. The collective stench, the unidentifiable food, and the public bodily functions all contribute to a sense of profound dehumanization, where the boundaries of human endurance are constantly tested and redefined. The section leaves the reader with a chilling understanding of the true cost of survival in such an environment, where the very essence of what it means to be human is slowly but surely eroded. You try not to look too closely at the sores on your skin or the blackness starting to creep up your toenails. If something falls off, you'll deal with it then. After a few days, the trench starts to feel normal. Not good, not safe, but familiar. You learn where to step to avoid the worst puddles. You figure out how to balance your rifle so it doesn't rust overnight. You stop reacting when someone coughs up blood next to you. This isn't survival. It's adaptation. You're not living through it. You're becoming part of it. A soggy, lice-ridden extension of the trench itself. And deep down, part of you knows, if the trench wanted you gone, it would have swallowed you already. So, you stay. You slump in your corner of the mud pit and listen to the scurry of rats behind you, the groans of men nearby, and the endless, eternal drip of water from a place that should have run dry long ago. You tell yourself you'll get used to it, that this is just another phase, another hardship, another test of your endurance. But you're wrong. This isn't a test. This is the curriculum. Everything before this was just orientation. Life in the trenches never stops being awful. It just becomes familiar. This section explores the chilling psychological and physical transformation that occurs as soldiers adapt to the horrific conditions of the trenches. It begins with a stark portrayal of the physical decay that becomes an accepted part of daily life. The casual dismissal of sores on your skin or the blackness starting to creep up your toenails is not a sign of resilience, but of profound desensitization. The grim pragmatism of, if something falls off, you'll deal with it then, highlights a terrifying acceptance of bodily disintegration, a stark contrast to any normal human concern for health and well-being. This immediate immersion into a world where physical decay is commonplace forces a rapid re-evaluation of what constitutes normal and acceptable suffering. The body, once a source of pride and capability, becomes a mere vessel for endurance, its ailments acknowledged but not dwelled upon, as if to do so would be to invite further despair. The most unsettling aspect of this adaptation is the trench's insidious transformation from a temporary hell to a normal and familiar environment. This isn't a positive development. It's a sign of deep psychological scarring. The trench, with its pervasive mud, stench, and constant threat becomes a new baseline for existence. The learning of practical skills, where to step to, avoid the worst puddles, how to balance your rifle so it doesn't rust overnight, are not acts of mastery, but of desperate necessity. These are the small, grim victories that allow for continued survival in an otherwise unbearable landscape. The chilling detail of no longer reacting when someone coughs up blood next to you signifies a complete erosion of empathy and a profound emotional numbness. This is not a conscious choice, but an involuntary defense mechanism, a necessary detachment from the constant suffering that surrounds them. The human mind, in its desperate attempt to preserve sanity, erects walls against the overwhelming tide of horror, leading to a chilling indifference to the suffering of others, and indeed to one's own. The narrative explicitly states that this process is not survival, but adaptation, a crucial distinction. Survival implies a temporary state, a struggle to overcome. Adaptation, in this context, means a fundamental change, emerging with the environment. The soldier is no longer merely enduring the trench. He is becoming part of it, a soggy, lice-ridden extension of the trench itself. This powerful metaphor illustrates the complete dehumanization that occurs where the individual identity is subsumed by the collective misery and the physical reality of the trench. The soldier becomes indistinguishable from the mud, the lice, and the decay, a living embodiment of the environment's pervasive influence. This transformation is not chosen, but forced, a grim necessity for continued existence in a world that offers no escape. The chilling realization that if the trench wanted you gone, it would have swallowed you already, imbues the trench with a malevolent sentience, a predatory will. It suggests that the trench is not merely a passive environment, but an active participant in their torment, choosing who to consume and who to allow to linger. This personification of the trench further emphasizes the soldier's complete lack of control and his utter subjugation to this monstrous entity. The act of staying, of slumping in a corner of the mud pit, is not a choice but a grim acceptance of their fate. The sounds that accompany this resignation, the scurry of rats, the groans of men, and the endless, eternal drip of water, form a macabre symphony of despair, a constant reminder of their inescapable reality. The water, dripping from a place that should have run dry long ago, symbolizes the endlessness of their suffering, a perpetual torment that defies natural limits. In a desperate attempt to cope, the soldier tries to rationalize his suffering, telling himself that he will get used to it, that this is just another phase, another hardship, another test of your endurance. This is a classic coping mechanism, an attempt to impose meaning and temporality on an experience that is inherently meaningless and endless. However, the narrative immediately shatters this illusion with a brutal correction. But you're wrong. This isn't a test. This is the curriculum. Everything before this was just orientation. This powerful statement redefines their entire experience. Training, with its structured drills and predictable punishments, was merely a preliminary, a deceptive introduction to the true nature of their existence. The trench is the ultimate school, and its lessons are brutal, unending, and designed to break the human spirit. The curriculum is not about learning to fight, but about learning to suffer, to endure the unbearable, and to accept the unacceptable. The final poignant sentence, life in the trenches never stops being awful, it just becomes familiar, encapsulates the profound tragedy of adaptation. It's not that the suffering lessens or that the conditions improve. Rather, the soldier's perception shifts and the horrific becomes the norm. This familiarity is not comfort, but a deeper, more insidious form of despair, a resignation to a life devoid of joy, hope, or even the expectation of an end. It signifies a complete loss of perspective, where the extreme becomes the ordinary and the capacity for shock and outrage is extinguished. This adaptation, while necessary for physical survival, comes at an immense psychological cost, leaving the soldier permanently scarred and fundamentally altered. The trench, in its relentless grip, not only claims lives, but also reshapes the very essence of those who survive, leaving them as permanent extensions of its muddy, decaying embrace. The grim reality is that there is no escape, only a deeper immersion into the curriculum of despair, where the only lesson learned is the endlessness of suffering and the chilling familiarity of the awful. Life in the trenches never stops being awful. It just becomes familiar. You wake up damp, already cold, and vaguely nauseous from a combination of hunger, rot, and the kind of sleep that leaves your joints locked and your mouth tasting like old copper. There's no sunrise to greet you, just a vague lightening of the gray sludge sky, barely visible through the tangled netting and broken boards overhead. You sit up, your spine cracking like someone stepped on a bundle of kindling, and prepare yourself for another day of nothing in particular and everything at once. There is no schedule, no clock, just an endless rotation of tedium and terror. Sometimes you're handed a shovel and told to dig a trench, a latrine, a drainage channel, or maybe just a hole no one intends to use. Other times you're told to stand guard and watch an empty stretch of mud for hours, straining to see movement that never comes until all at once it does. You don't blink as much as you used to. Blinking is how people get shot, so you stare, and when your eyes water, you just let it happen. This section delves into the soul-crushing monotony of daily existence in the trenches, a relentless cycle of tedium punctuated by moments of sheer terror. The opening sentence, a chilling refrain from the previous section, immediately establishes the pervasive nature of this awful familiarity. The act of waking is not a renewal, but a descent back into misery. The soldier is already damp, already cold, and vaguely nauseous, a testament to the constant physical discomfort and the unrefreshing nature of sleep. The description of his mouth tasting like old copper is a visceral detail that underscores the pervasive, metallic tang of war, a taste that seeps into every aspect of their existence. The absence of a proper sunrise, replaced by a vague lightening of the gray sludge sky, symbolizes the loss of natural rhythms and the oppressive, unchanging gloom of their environment. The image of the sky, barely visible through the tangled netting and broken boards overhead reinforces the sense of confinement and the constant reminder of their precarious shelter. The physical act of sitting up with a spine cracking like someone stepped on a bundle of kindling speaks to the profound physical toll of their existence. Every movement is an effort, a reminder of the body's slow decay. The preparation for another day of nothing in particular and everything at once encapsulates the paradoxical nature of trench life. Long stretches of mind-numbing boredom interspersed with sudden, life-threatening events. The absence of a schedule or clock further emphasizes the timeless, unending nature of their ordeal. Time loses its meaning, replaced by an endless rotation of tedium and terror. This lack of structure contributes to the psychological disorientation, leaving the soldiers adrift in a sea of uncertainty and dread. The tasks assigned are often pointless and repetitive, highlighting the futility of their efforts. Being handed a shovel and told to dig a trench, a latrine, a drainage channel, or maybe just a hole no one intends to use, underscores the Sisyphean nature of their labor. They are constantly battling against the elements, digging and redigging, with little to no lasting impact. This sense of futility is a powerful contributor to the psychological erosion, as the soldiers are forced to confront the meaninglessness of their actions. The alternative to digging is equally soul-crushing. Standing guard and watching an empty stretch of mud for hours, straining to see movement that never comes until all at once it does. This constant vigilance, the anticipation of an unseen enemy, creates a state of perpetual tension and anxiety. The mind, starved of stimulation, begins to play tricks, and the line between reality and imagination blurs. The chilling detail that you don't blink as much as you used to, blinking is how people get shot, is a stark reminder of the constant threat and the extreme measures taken to survive. The act of staring, even when eyes water, becomes a grim necessity, a testament to the soldier's desperate attempt to maintain control in an uncontrollable environment. The monotony is not just a lack of activity, but a deeper, more insidious form of suffering. It is the endless repetition of discomfort, fear, and despair. Each day is a mirror image of the last, with no prospect of change or relief. This relentless sameness erodes the spirit, crushing hope and fostering a sense of profound resignation. The mind, starved of novelty and purpose, begins to turn inward, replaying past traumas and dwelling on present miseries. The lack of meaningful activity leaves too much room for thought, and in the trenches, thought is a dangerous companion. It leads to introspection, to questioning, and ultimately to despair. The soldiers are trapped not only by the physical confines of the trench, but also by the psychological prison of their own minds. The narrative subtly contrasts the tedium with the ever-present threat of terror. The long stretches of boredom are punctuated by sudden, violent events. A shell explosion, a sniper's bullet, an enemy raid. This unpredictable alternation between monotony and horror creates a unique form of psychological torture. The soldiers are never truly at ease, always on edge, waiting for the next inevitable catastrophe. This constant state of hyperarousal, combined with the mind-numbing boredom, leads to a profound sense of exhaustion and emotional numbness, the ability to feel, to react, is slowly eroded, replaced by a grim, mechanical endurance. This section powerfully conveys the soul-destroying nature of daily life in the trenches. It is a world devoid of meaning, purpose, or hope, where the only certainty is the endless repetition of suffering. The narratives focus on the mundane details of waking, digging, and standing guard, highlights the profound impact of monotony on the human psyche. The soldier is not just fighting an external enemy, but also an internal one, a battle against despair, boredom, and the slow erosion of his own humanity. The chilling familiarity of the awful, the acceptance of the unbearable, and the constant oscillation between tedium and terror create a vivid and unforgettable portrait of a life reduced to its most basic and brutal elements. The section leaves the reader with a deep understanding of the psychological torment endured by those who lived through the relentless, grinding misery of the Western Front, where each day was a fresh hell, indistinguishable from the last, and the only escape was the fleeting, terrifying release of violence. Then there's the freezing, the kind of cold that doesn't stay on your skin, but burrows into your bones, like it's setting up a permanent residence. You try to keep moving, try to keep the blood flowing, but some mornings you can't feel your hands until noon. You stamp your feet, rub your arms, press your fingers into your armpits, but it never helps for long. The damp makes it worse. It creeps into your clothes, your bedroll, your lungs. You cough in bursts, rattling and wet, and so does everyone else. The whole trench sounds like a tuberculosis ward. You spend hours shoveling mud that never leaves. Every scoop you toss out gets replaced by another that sloughs back in. It's a Sisyphean farce, a joke no one's laughing at. You scrape, dig, haul, only for the wall to collapse or the floor to rise again under a heavy rain. Sometimes you find something buried, a boot, a rusted tin, a bone. You don't say anything. If it's a man, someone will mark it. If not, it goes back in. You don't have time for archaeology. The dead are part of the infrastructure now. This section vividly portrays the relentless physical torment inflicted by the cold and the futile, unending labor of maintaining the trenches. The cold is not merely an external sensation, but an insidious force that burrows into your bones, like it's setting up a permanent residence. This personification emphasizes its pervasive and inescapable nature, a constant companion that gnaws at the very core of one's being. The desperate attempts to generate warmth, stamping feet, rubbing arms, pressing fingers into armpits, are futile gestures against an overwhelming force, highlighting the body's losing battle against the elements. The chilling detail of not being able to feel one's hands until noon underscores the severity of the cold and its debilitating effects on basic motor functions. This isn't just discomfort, it's a constant threat to the soldier's ability to perform essential tasks, further eroding their capacity for survival. The dampness, a constant presence in the trenches, exacerbates the cold, making it a truly unbearable ordeal. It creeps into your clothes, your bedroll, your lungs, a pervasive infiltration that leaves no part of the body untouched. The resulting coughs, rattling, and wet are not isolated incidents, but a collective symphony of suffering, transforming the entire trench into a tuberculosis ward. This grim comparison paints a picture of widespread illness and slow decay, where the very act of breathing becomes a painful reminder of their deteriorating health. The constant struggle against the elements is not just a physical battle, but a psychological one, as the body slowly succumbs to the relentless assault of cold and damp. The labor in the trenches is depicted as a Sisyphean farce, a cruel and meaningless cycle of effort and futility. The act of shoveling mud that never leaves, where every scoop you toss out gets replaced by another that sloughs back in, perfectly encapsulates the endless, unproductive nature of their work. This isn't just hard labor, it's a deliberate torment, a joke that no one's laughing at. The constant collapse of walls and the rising of the trench floor under heavy rain further emphasize the futility of their efforts. The soldiers are trapped in a perpetual state of construction and deconstruction, their efforts negated by the relentless forces of nature and the inherent instability of their environment. This endless, unrewarding toil contributes significantly to the psychological erosion, fostering a sense of hopelessness and despair. The grim discoveries made during this labor, a boot, a rusted tin, a bone, are treated with a chilling indifference. The casual dismissal of these findings, particularly the human remains, underscores the profound desensitization that occurs in the trenches. The pragmatic decision not to say anything if it's not a man, and the chilling statement that if it's a man, someone will mark it, highlights the brutal reality of mass casualties and the dehumanization of the dead. The phrase, "You don't have time for archaeology," is a powerful understatement, emphasizing the constant pressure of survival and the complete absence of any space for reflection or reverence. The most disturbing revelation is that the dead are part of the infrastructure now, a chilling metaphor that transforms human remains into mere building materials, a testament to the sheer scale of death and the complete disregard for individual lives. This acceptance of the dead as part of the landscape further reinforces the dehumanizing nature of the trenches, where life and death are intertwined in a grotesque, indifferent cycle. The relentless cold and the unending labor combine to create a pervasive sense of exhaustion, both physical and mental. The body is constantly battling hypothermia, its energy reserves depleted by the futile work. The mind, too, is worn down by the monotony and the constant exposure to suffering. There is no respite, no opportunity for true recovery. The soldiers are trapped in a vicious cycle of discomfort, effort, and despair, their lives reduced to a grim struggle for mere existence. The narrative's unflinching portrayal of these conditions leaves a lasting impression, highlighting the profound physical and psychological toll of trench warfare. The cold is not just a physical sensation, but a symbol of the emotional numbness that sets in, while the Sisyphean labor represents the futility of their efforts and the endlessness of their suffering. This section paints a bleak and unforgettable picture of a life defined by relentless torment and the slow, inevitable erosion of the human spirit. Furthermore, The constant exposure to the elements and the lack of proper shelter contribute to a myriad of health issues beyond just the coughs. Frostbite, hypothermia, and various respiratory illnesses become commonplace, further weakening the already strained bodies of the soldiers. The dampness seeps into their joints, causing chronic pain and stiffness, making every movement an agonizing effort. The inability to dry clothes or get warm means that the soldiers are in a perpetual state of discomfort, their bodies constantly fighting against the encroaching cold. This relentless physical assault wears down their resilience, making them more susceptible to disease and injury. The trench, in its relentless grip, becomes a slow, agonizing killer, claiming lives not just through direct combat, but through the insidious effects of exposure and neglect. The psychological impact of this unending, meaningless labor is equally devastating. The soldiers are forced to engage in tasks that offer no sense of accomplishment or progress. The constant digging, only to see their work undone by rain or collapse, fosters a deep sense of futility and hopelessness. This lack of purpose, combined with the physical exhaustion, leads to a profound sense of apathy and despair. The mind, like the body, becomes numb, losing its capacity for joy, hope, or even anger. The soldiers are reduced to automatons, performing their tasks without question, their spirits slowly crushed by the relentless grind of trench life. The absence of any meaningful objective beyond mere survival strips away their sense of agency and purpose, leaving them adrift in a sea of meaningless suffering. This section, therefore, serves as a powerful testament to the dehumanizing effects of trench warfare, where the soldiers are subjected to a constant barrage of physical and psychological torment. The relentless cold and the Sisyphean labor are not just challenges to be overcome, but forces that actively erode their humanity, transforming them into mere extensions of the muddy, decaying landscape. The narrative's unflinching portrayal of these conditions leaves a lasting impression, highlighting the profound and irreversible changes wrought upon those who endured the Western Front. The soldiers are not just fighting an enemy, but battling the very environment itself, a battle they are destined to lose, slowly and agonizingly, until they too become part of the grim infrastructure of the trench. You eat when you can, and what you're given: cold beans, a slice of bread that could stop a bullet, maybe a sliver of cheese, if someone in supply was feeling generous or guilty. You don't ask where the meat comes from anymore. If it's hot, you're grateful. If it's not, you eat it anyway. Hunger turns everything into a flavor. Even mud has a taste now, earthy, metallic, faintly fungal. You know this because it's gotten into your canteen, your food, your teeth. You've been chewing on war since you got here. The latrine is a hole in the ground, surrounded by sandbags and the kind of smell that makes your vision blur. You try to hold it in until you can't. Then you balance precariously, pants down, knees trembling, hoping no one lobs a shell during the most vulnerable 30 seconds of your day. You've heard stories of men dying like that, mid-squat, pants around their ankles. There's no dignity in this war, but that's one way you definitely don't want to go. You wipe with whatever you can find. Sometimes it's newspaper, sometimes it's your own sleeve. This section delves into the grim realities of sustenance and sanitation in the trenches, highlighting the profound degradation of basic human needs and the complete erosion of dignity. The opening sentence immediately establishes the scarcity and poor quality of food. The rations are not a source of comfort or pleasure, but a mere means of survival, consumed out of necessity rather than desire. The description of cold beans, a slice of bread that could stop a bullet, maybe a sliver of cheese paints a stark picture of meager and unappetizing fare. The bread's bullet-stopping quality is a grim, darkly humorous detail that underscores its rock-hard consistency, a far cry from any notion of fresh, palatable food. The fleeting possibility of cheese, dependent on the capricious mood of a supply officer, further emphasizes the arbitrary nature of their existence and the constant struggle for even the smallest comforts. The soldier's complete lack of inquiry about the origin of the meat, you don't ask where the meat comes from anymore, is a chilling testament to the extreme conditions that force men to abandon all previous standards of decency and moral consideration. This unspoken acceptance, born of desperate hunger, implies a grim understanding that the meat could be from any source, including the horses that frequently perished in the brutal environment. The simple dichotomy of if it's hot, you're grateful, if it's not, you eat it anyway, encapsulates the brutal pragmatism of survival, where the only criterion for consumption is its availability, not its quality or temperature. Hunger, the ultimate equalizer, turns everything into a flavor, forcing the soldier to find sustenance in the most unappetizing and even repulsive forms. The most visceral and disturbing detail in this section is the taste of mud. The soldier's intimate knowledge of its flavor, earthy, metallic, faintly fungal, is a horrifying testament to the pervasive contamination of their environment. The mud is not just on their boots or clothes. It has infiltrated their very being, getting into your canteen, your food, your teeth. This constant, inescapable ingestion of the earth, a symbol of the trench itself, signifies a profound merging with their squalid surroundings. The chilling realization that you've been chewing on war since you got here is a powerful metaphor for the all-encompassing nature of their suffering, where even the act of eating becomes a consumption of the conflict itself, a constant reminder of their grim reality. The description of the latrine is equally unflinching, highlighting the complete absence of privacy and dignity. It is a mere hole in the ground surrounded by sandbags, a crude and exposed facility that offers no respite from the pervasive stench. The smell, so potent that it makes your vision blur, is a constant assault on the senses, a visceral reminder of the unsanitary conditions and the collective human waste. The act of defecation, a private and vulnerable moment, becomes a precarious and terrifying ordeal. The soldier's desperate attempt to hold it in until you can't underscores the extreme discomfort and the lack of control over basic bodily functions. The image of balancing precariously, pants down, knees trembling, hoping no one lobs a shell during the most vulnerable 30 seconds of your day, is a darkly humorous yet deeply disturbing portrayal of the constant threat of death. even in the most undignified circumstances. The fear of dying mid-squat with pants around their ankles is a specific and particularly humiliating form of death that underscores the complete erosion of dignity in this war. The grim statement, "There's no dignity in this war, but that's one way you definitely don't want to go," encapsulates the profound loss of self-respect and the desperate desire to avoid such a ignominious end. The lack of proper hygiene extends to the most basic acts of personal care. The soldier's reliance on whatever you can find for wiping, whether it be newspaper or your own sleeve, further emphasizes the complete breakdown of civilized norms in the suit of desperate measures taken to maintain even a semblance of cleanliness. This detail, seemingly minor, speaks volumes about the scarcity of resources and the extreme conditions that force men to resort to such crude methods. The constant exposure to human waste, combined with the lack of washing facilities, contributes to the rampant spread of disease and the pervasive stench that defines the trenches. The body, constantly battling against external contaminants, slowly succumbs to the unsanitary environment, further blurring the lines between the living and the dead. This section powerfully conveys the profound degradation of human existence in the trenches, where basic needs are reduced to their most primal forms, and dignity is a forgotten concept. The grim realities of food and sanitation are not merely background details, but central elements of the soldier's daily torment. The narrative's unflinching portrayal of these conditions leaves a lasting impression, highlighting the physical and psychological toll of constant hunger, pervasive filth, and the complete absence of privacy. The soldier's grim acceptance of these realities, his desensitization to the repulsive, and his desperate struggle for survival underscore the extreme nature of his ordeal. The taste of war, both literal and metaphorical, permeates every aspect of his being, leaving him permanently scarred by the experience. The latrine, a symbol of ultimate indignity, becomes a microcosm of the entire trench experience, a place where vulnerability and the constant threat of death converge, leaving no room for the pretense of humanity. The constant threat of disease, exacerbated by the unsanitary conditions, is an unspoken but ever-present fear. Dysentery, cholera, and typhus are not abstract concepts but tangible threats that claim lives as surely as bullets and shells. The lack of clean water, the pervasive presence of human and animal waste, and the close proximity of thousands of men create a perfect breeding ground for pathogens. The soldier's body, already weakened by hunger, cold, and exhaustion, is ill-equipped to fight off these invisible enemies. The casual mention of chewing on war since arrival extends beyond the literal taste of mud. It encompasses the constant ingestion of disease, the slow poisoning of the body by the very environment they inhabit. This internal battle, fought silently and relentlessly, adds another layer of suffering to their already unbearable existence. The psychological impact of such a degraded existence cannot be overstated. The constant exposure to filth, the loss of privacy, and the daily struggle for basic sustenance erode the soldier's sense of self-worth and dignity. The body, once a source of strength and capability, becomes a mere vessel for suffering, its needs reduced to the most primal. The mind, too, begins to adapt, developing a grim indifference to conditions that would be unbearable in any other context. The soldier's ability to function, to continue the endless cycle of enduring, is a testament to a terrifying resilience born of necessity, a survival mechanism that blurs the lines between human and animal, the constant reminder of their own bodily functions, stripped of all decorum, further contributes to this dehumanization, reducing them to a state of primal existence where the niceties of civilization are utterly irrelevant. The narrative also subtly touches upon the psychological toll of constant hunger. Hunger is not just a physical sensation, but a mental one, a gnawing emptiness that consumes thoughts and distorts perceptions. It makes men desperate, willing to consume anything, regardless of its origin or palatability. This desperation can lead to moral compromises, as seen in the unspoken acceptance of the meat's unknown source. Hunger makes men stupid, not in the sense of intellectual deficiency, but in its ability to override reason and judgment, reducing complex decision making to the singular pursuit of calories. This constant state of deprivation, both physical and mental, contributes to the overall sense of despair and hopelessness that permeates trench life. The soldier's world shrinks to the immediate, the tangible, the next meager meal, with no room for abstract thought or long-term planning. The latrine, beyond its physical discomforts, serves as a powerful symbol of the complete loss of control and the constant vulnerability of the soldiers. It is a place where the thin veneer of civilization is stripped away, exposing the raw, animalistic nature of human existence. The fear of being shelled during such a vulnerable moment is not just a fear of death, but a fear of an undignified death, a final humiliation in a war that offers no dignity. This specific fear highlights the psychological impact of constant exposure to danger, where even the most mundane activities become fraught with peril. The act of wiping with whatever is available, whether newspaper or one's own sleeve, further emphasizes the desperate measures taken to maintain even a semblance of cleanliness and self-respect in an environment that actively seeks to strip them away. This detail, seemingly minor, speaks volumes about the scarcity of resources and the extreme conditions that force men to resort to such crude methods. In essence, this section paints a stark and unyielding picture of life in the trenches as a constant battle against overwhelming physical and environmental forces. The soldier is not merely fighting an enemy, but battling the very ground he stands on, the air he breathes, and the insidious decay that threatens to consume him. The detailed descriptions of the meager rations, the pervasive filth, and the physical manifestations of suffering create a powerful and unforgettable image of a hellish existence. The narrative's unflinching portrayal of the dehumanizing effects of such conditions leaves a lasting impression, highlighting the profound and irreversible transformation of the men who endured the Western Front. The soldier's journey into this abyss is not just a physical one, but a descent into a new, horrifying reality where the boundaries of human endurance are constantly tested and redefined. The section concludes with a chilling sense of resignation. where the soldier's body and mind are irrevocably intertwined with the very filth that surrounds him, a permanent resident of this living grave. The taste of war, both literal and metaphorical, permeates every aspect of his being, leaving him permanently scarred by the experience. The latrine, a symbol of ultimate indignity, becomes a microcosm of the entire trench experience, a place where vulnerability and the constant threat of death converge, leaving no room for the pretense of humanity. This continuous assault on the senses and the soul leaves an indelible mark, shaping the soldier into a being fundamentally altered by the crucible of war. People start to unravel. You can see it in their faces, which go slack and pale, like wax figures left too close to the fire. Some mutter to themselves constantly. Others go silent for days. There's a man in your unit who used to recite poetry. Now he just rocks back and forth, eyes wide, lips twitching. You try to help at first, ask if he's all right, offer him a bit of chocolate, but after a while, you just avoid his corner of the trench. You have to. Madness spreads here like mold. If you watch it too long, it finds a way in. Shells come when they want. There's no rhythm, no warning, just a sudden roar, the earth heaving like a beast beneath you, and then the dull thud of impact, sometimes near, sometimes far too close. You hit the ground by instinct. Sometimes you scream. Sometimes you just clench every muscle and hope you're not next. Shrapnel doesn't care who you are. It slices clean through flesh, bone, hope. You've seen a man cut in half and still twitching. You've seen a headless corpse sitting upright, like it hasn't caught on yet. This section delves into the profound psychological disintegration experienced by soldiers in the trenches, a process as insidious and destructive as the physical decay. The opening observation, people start to unravel, immediately sets a chilling tone, portraying mental collapse not as an isolated incident, but as a pervasive, almost inevitable consequence of the environment. The visual metaphor of faces going slack and pale, like wax figures, left too close to the fire, is particularly striking, conveying a sense of melting humanity, a loss of form and vitality under the relentless heat of trauma. The varied manifestations of this unraveling, some muttering constantly, others retreating into prolonged silence, highlight the diverse ways in which the human mind attempts to cope or fails to cope with unbearable stress. The poignant detail of a man who once recited poetry, now reduced to rocking back and forth with wide eyes and twitching lips, is a powerful illustration of the profound loss of self, a descent from intellectual engagement to primal, involuntary responses. This transformation is not just a personal tragedy, but a collective one, as the unit witnesses the slow erosion of their comrades' sanity. The initial impulse to help, to offer comfort and a bit of chocolate, speaks to a lingering humanity, a desire to connect and alleviate suffering. However, this compassion is quickly extinguished by the grim reality of the trenches, the necessity of avoiding the afflicted, the chilling realization that you have to underscores the brutal pragmatism required for self-preservation, the metaphor of madness spreading like mold, is particularly apt, suggesting an infectious, pervasive force that contaminates the very atmosphere of the trench. The warning, if you watch it too long, it finds a way in, serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of the human mind and the constant vigilance required to protect one's own sanity. The psychological toll is not just a consequence of direct trauma, but also of witnessing the mental collapse of others, a constant mirror reflecting one's own potential fate. The unpredictable and relentless nature of shelling is presented as a primary catalyst for this psychological unraveling. The absence of rhythm or warning transforms the battlefield into a realm of pure chaos, where danger can strike at any moment from any direction. The sudden roar and the earth heaving like a beast beneath you are visceral descriptions that convey the sheer physical force and disorienting impact of artillery fire. The dull thud of impact, whether near, sometimes far too close, creates a constant state of anxiety and hypervigilance. The instinctive reaction to hit the ground is a primal response to an existential threat, a desperate attempt to merge with the earth and escape the unseen enemy. The varied reactions, screaming or simply clenching every muscle and hoping not to be next, illustrate the diverse ways in which fear manifests, but all point to a shared, overwhelming terror. The indiscriminate brutality of shrapnel is emphasized by the chilling statement, "Shrapnel doesn't care who you are. It slices clean through flesh, bone, hope." This personification of shrapnel as an indifferent, destructive force highlights the arbitrary nature of death in the trenches, where social status, personal history, or moral character hold no sway. The graphic descriptions of a man cut in half and still twitching, and a headless corpse sitting upright like it hasn't caught on yet, are not merely sensational, but serve to underscore the grotesque reality of battlefield injuries. These images are designed to shock and horrify, to convey the sheer savagery of the conflict and its capacity to reduce human beings to mere fragments of flesh and bone. The lingering twitch of a severed body and the uncanny posture of a headless corpse suggest a horrifying continuation of life beyond death, a macabre dance of the recently departed that further blurs the lines between the living and the dead, contributing to the psychological trauma of the survivors. The constant exposure to such scenes of extreme violence and suffering inevitably leads to a profound desensitization, a necessary coping mechanism for survival. However, this emotional numbness comes at a significant cost, eroding empathy and the capacity for normal human reactions. The soldiers become accustomed to sights and sounds that would drive anyone else to madness, creating a chilling detachment from the horrors around them. This desensitization, while protecting them from immediate psychological collapse, also isolates them, making it difficult to connect with others or to process the enormity of their experiences. The unraveling of the mind is not just about individual breakdown, but also about the collective erosion of humanity within the trench, where the boundaries of sanity are constantly tested and redefined. This section powerfully conveys the psychological torment of trench warfare, illustrating how the constant threat of death the witnessing of unspeakable horrors, and the pervasive atmosphere of decay combine to erode the human mind. The narrative's unflinching portrayal of mental breakdown, the infectious nature of madness, and the indiscriminate brutality of shelling creates a vivid and unforgettable picture of the psychological toll of the Western Front. The soldiers are not just fighting an external enemy, but also an internal one, a battle against their own minds, which are slowly but surely unraveling under the relentless pressure of an inhuman environment. The section leaves the reader with a chilling understanding of the true cost of survival, where the price of staying alive is often the loss of one's sanity, a descent into a world where the grotesque becomes normal, and the boundaries of human endurance are constantly tested and redefined. There are quiet moments too, long, terrible stretches where nothing happens. These are worse in their own way. They give your mind room to wander. You think about home, about food that isn't gray, about dry socks and actual silence. Then you remember you're not supposed to think, you're supposed to wait. Because when something does happen, it will happen fast, and it will not wait for you. So you count things: footsteps, breaths, drops of water falling from the trench roof. You hum songs with no words. You press your fingers into the mud just to feel something colder than you. Evenings are worse somehow. The darkness settles like a blanket made of wet wool, heavy and stifling. Lamps are rationed, and candles flicker weakly in jam tins nailed to posts. You write letters by dim light, saying things you don't mean to people who will pretend to believe you. You say you're fine. You say the lads are holding up. You say the rations are getting better. You fold the lies neatly and lick the envelope shut, sealing in the version of yourself that no longer exists. Then you tuck it away and hope a rat doesn't eat it before morning. You sleep in shifts, if you sleep at all. The trench wall becomes your pillow. The man beside you becomes your heater. You wrap yourself in your coat, curl up like an animal, and pray you wake up still breathing. Some nights you don't sleep because of the shelling. Some nights because of the cold. Some because of the fear. And sometimes, worst of all, because it's too quiet, and your brain has finally started trying to process everything it's seen. That's when the real horror sets in. Not the blood, not the gore, the waiting. This section delves into the insidious psychological torment of the quiet moments in the trenches, arguing that these periods of deceptive calm are often more harrowing than the overt violence of battle. The phrase, long, terrible stretches where nothing happens, immediately establishes a paradoxical truth. The absence of action is not peace, but a different, more profound form of suffering. This quiet allows the mind to wander, a dangerous freedom in an environment where introspection leads only to despair. The thoughts that surface of home, of palatable food, of dry socks, and of genuine silence are not comforting, but agonizing reminders of a world lost, a stark contrast to their current squalid reality. The immediate suppression of these thoughts, the grim self-admonition that you're not supposed to think, highlights the necessity of mental discipline in survival, a forced detachment from anything that might undermine their fragile resilience. The soldier is not meant to reflect, but to wait, a passive, agonizing state of anticipation for the inevitable, sudden eruption of violence, the chilling certainty that when something does happen, it will happen fast and it will not wait for you, underscores the constant, underlying threat that permeates every moment of their existence, even in apparent stillness. In the absence of external stimuli, the soldier's mind turns inward, seeking anchors in the mundane. The act of counting things, footsteps, breaths, drops of water falling from the trench roof, is a desperate attempt to impose order on chaos, to find a rhythm in the relentless disorder. Humming songs with no words is a primal form of self-soothing, a way to fill the oppressive silence with something, anything, that isn't the sound of their own racing thoughts or the distant echoes of war. Pressing fingers into the mud just to feel something colder than you is a visceral act of self-affirmation, a desperate attempt to connect with a tangible reality, even if that reality is cold, wet, and filthy. It's a way to confirm their own existence, to feel something other than the pervasive numbness that threatens to consume them. These small, repetitive actions are not just coping mechanisms, but desperate rituals, a fragile bulwark against the encroaching madness. Evenings, with their deepening darkness, bring a heightened sense of dread. The darkness is not merely the absence of light, but a palpable presence, settling like a blanket made of wet wool, heavy and stifling. This sensory detail evokes a feeling of suffocation, of being weighed down by the oppressive gloom. The scarcity of light, lamps are rationed, and candles flicker weakly in jam tins nailed to posts, further amplifies the sense of isolation and vulnerability. In this dim, flickering light, the act of writing letters home becomes a poignant and deeply deceptive ritual. The soldier crafts a false narrative, saying things you don't mean to people who will pretend to believe you. The lies: you say you're fine. You say the lads are holding up. You say the rations are getting better, are not just for the recipients, but for the soldier himself, a desperate attempt to maintain a semblance of normalcy, a connection to a world that no longer exists for him. The meticulous folding of the lies and the licking of the envelope, sealing in the version of yourself that no longer exists, is a powerful metaphor for the profound psychological schism that occurs in the trenches, where the soldier's true self is buried beneath layers of fabricated normalcy. The final, grim hope that a rat doesn't eat it before morning underscores the pervasive presence of vermin and the constant threat to even the most personal and fragile expressions of humanity. Sleep, already a tortured affair, becomes even more elusive and fraught with peril. The soldiers sleep in shifts, if you sleep at all, a fragmented, unrefreshing rest constantly interrupted by external threats and internal anxieties. The trench wall, a cold and unyielding surface, becomes their pillow, a symbol of their complete lack of comfort. The man beside them, a source of warmth, is reduced to a mere heater, highlighting the dehumanization of human connection in the face of extreme conditions. The act of wrapping oneself in a coat and curling up like an animal is a primal response to the cold and the fear, a regression to a more basic state of being. The desperate prayer to wake up still breathing encapsulates the constant, underlying fear of death that permeates every moment of their existence. Even in sleep, the reasons for sleeplessness are varied, each a facet of the trench's torment. Some nights, it's the shelling, the overt violence, that keeps them awake. Other nights, it's the cold, the relentless physical discomfort. Some nights, it's the fear, the pervasive anxiety that gnaws at their minds. But the worst of all is when it's too quiet and your brain has finally started trying to process everything it's seen. This is the ultimate horror, the moment when the mind, deprived of external distractions, is forced to confront the accumulated trauma. It is in these moments of profound stillness that the true, unvarnished horror sets in. Not the blood, not the gore, the waiting. The waiting is the most insidious torment because it is internal, a constant, gnawing dread that cannot be escaped. It is the anticipation of violence, the processing of past horrors, and the grim realization that there is no end in sight. This quiet terror is a testament to the profound psychological toll of trench warfare, where the mind becomes its own prison and the absence of external threat only amplifies the internal suffering. This section powerfully conveys the psychological torture of waiting and the deceptive calm that often precedes moments of extreme violence. The narratives focus on the internal landscape of the soldier's mind, his desperate coping mechanisms, and the insidious nature of fear, creates a vivid and unforgettable picture of the psychological toll of the Western Front. The soldier is not just fighting an external enemy, but also an internal one, a battle against his own thoughts and memories, which are slowly but surely unraveling under the relentless pressure of an inhuman environment. The section leaves the reader with a chilling understanding of the true cost of survival, where the price of staying alive is often the loss of one's sanity, a descent into a world where the grotesque becomes normal, and the boundaries of human endurance are constantly tested and redefined. The quiet terror of waiting, the forced self-deception, and the fragmented, unrefreshing sleep all contribute to a profound sense of despair, highlighting the relentless and all-encompassing nature of suffering in the trenches. Eventually, the sun rises again. Not that it matters. Another day begins, indistinguishable from the one before. You stand, stretch, piss into a tin, and look around at the same gray faces doing the same grim rituals. No one speaks unless they have to. There's nothing to say. The silence is not peaceful. It's heavy, a blanket woven from unspoken fears and unacknowledged despair. It's the silence of men who have seen too much, felt too much, and have nothing left to offer but their grim endurance. The routine is a cage, but also a strange comfort, a predictable rhythm in a world gone mad. Each action is a small victory against the chaos, a testament to the stubborn refusal of the human spirit to completely break. Yet, the breaking is always there, lurking at the edges, a shadow in the periphery of every exhausted eye. The lingering horror is not just the memory of what has been, but the certainty of what will be, an endless repetition of the unbearable. And through it all, the sun, indifferent and cold, rises again, illuminating another day of misery, another chapter in the curriculum of despair. This concluding section encapsulates the relentless, cyclical nature of suffering in the trenches, where each day is a mere continuation of the last, devoid of meaning or hope. The phrase, "eventually, the sun rises again," not that it matters immediately, establishes a profound sense of futility and resignation. The dawn, typically a symbol of new beginnings and hope, is stripped of its significance, becoming merely a marker of another day of indistinguishable misery. The physical acts of standing, stretching, and urinating into a tin are reduced to grim rituals, devoid of personal agency or comfort. The repetition of same gray faces doing the same grim rituals underscores the dehumanizing effect of the trenches, where individuality is erased and men become interchangeable components in a machine of suffering. The pervasive silence is not a sign of peace, but a blanket woven from unspoken fears and unacknowledged despair. This powerful metaphor conveys the oppressive weight of collective trauma, a silence born of exhaustion, desensitization, and the sheer inability to articulate the unspeakable horrors they have witnessed and endured. It is the silence of men who have nothing left to say, their words having been consumed by the vastness of their suffering. The routine, while a cage, paradoxically offers a strange comfort. In a world where chaos reigns, predictability becomes a desperate anchor. Each action, no matter how mundane or degrading, is a small victory against the chaos, a testament to the stubborn refusal of the human spirit to completely break. This highlights the paradoxical nature of human resilience in extreme conditions, where even the most basic acts of survival become acts of defiance. Yet, the narrative is quick to temper this notion of resilience with the ever-present threat of collapse. The breaking is always there, lurking at the edges, a shadow in the periphery of every exhausted eye. This subtle but persistent threat underscores the fragility of their mental state, a constant reminder that their endurance is finite and the abyss of madness is always near. The horror is not just in the past, but in the future, in the certainty of what will be, an endless repetition of the unbearable. This future-oriented dread is perhaps the most insidious form of torment, as it robs them of even the possibility of hope or escape. The indifference of the sun, rising cold and illuminating another day of misery, further emphasizes the cosmic scale of their suffering. Nature itself is detached, unfeeling, a silent witness to the human tragedy unfolding beneath its gaze. The curriculum of despair is a powerful concluding metaphor, reframing their entire experience not as a temporary ordeal, but as a structured, inescapable course of study in human suffering. Everything they have endured, from the initial shock of arrival to the daily grind of mud and cold, has been a lesson in this grim curriculum. There is no graduation, no end to the learning, only a deeper immersion into the depths of human misery. The soldiers are not just fighting a war, they are living a lesson, a perpetual education in the art of enduring the unbearable. This section also subtly reinforces the themes of dehumanization and the loss of individuality. The gray faces and grim rituals emphasize the erosion of personal identity as men become indistinguishable from one another, their unique personalities subsumed by the collective experience of suffering. The lack of conversation, the reliance on unspoken communication, further isolates them, even within their shared misery. The trench becomes a crucible that strips away all pretense, leaving only the raw, exposed core of human endurance. The soldiers are reduced to their most basic functions, their lives defined by the relentless cycle of survival and suffering. The absence of any meaningful interaction or emotional expression contributes to a profound sense of alienation, even from themselves. The lingering horror is not just the physical pain or the constant threat of death, but the psychological scars that will remain long after the war is over. The unspoken fears and unacknowledged despair will continue to haunt them, shaping their perceptions and their lives. The curriculum of despair is not something that can be unlearned. It is a permanent transformation, an indelible mark on their souls. The indifference of the sun, the endless repetition of days, and the pervasive silence all contribute to a sense of profound hopelessness, a realization that even if they survive, they will never truly escape the trenches. The war will continue to live within them, a constant reminder of the horrors they endured and the humanity they lost. Ultimately, this concluding section leaves the reader with a chilling sense of the profound and lasting impact of trench warfare. It is a world where hope is a dangerous illusion and endurance is the only virtue. The narrative's unflinching portrayal of the cyclical nature of suffering, the dehumanizing effects of the environment, and the psychological scars that linger long after the physical wounds have healed, creates a powerful and unforgettable picture of the Western Front. The soldiers are not just fighting a war, they are living a nightmare, a perpetual state of existence defined by misery, monotony, and the chilling familiarity of the awful. The sun may rise, but for these men, true dawn, with its promise of light and new beginnings, remains an elusive dream, forever obscured by the lingering horror of the trenches. The final image is one of profound resignation, a testament to the enduring power of trauma and the irreversible transformation of those who walked through the fires of the Great War. Their lives, forever altered, become a silent testament to the curriculum of despair, a lesson learned in the deepest pits of human suffering, a lesson that will echo through their days, long after the last shell has fallen and the mud has settled.